Honestly, it doesn't even really matter how their childhood turned out. They can have an erratic childhood. They can have a stable one. Almost all of the charts I've worked with, the child... Why, hello there, my little Uranus in the 4th house natives. Y'all are the ones that came here to revolutionize your roots and to transform any karmic wounds that you may have tied to instability that has existed within your generational lines of your family, which is absolutely no small feat to accomplish this lifetime. It takes a strong and resilient person to break out of the mold of the way that your family does things or handles things, especially for generations. And out of all the videos I've ever done, this is one of the hardest videos I've ever had to do. And I think it's because every time I went to hit record and talk about this placement, I just felt this intense burden on my shoulders. I don't even really know how to explain it other than I wanted to cry every time I went to hit record, because a part of me felt how incredibly unfair it was for a child to have this placement. So we do have a lot to unpack with this video, and I will do my very, very best to make sure I cover it all. And hopefully I don't cry, because I know y'all are some resilient and sometimes detached little people, so there's absolutely no need for that. So before I start, I do want to break down some things so that when I talk about traits that come along with this placement, you can understand where I'm coming from. So first, let's take a look at what Uranus is all about in astrology. So when I think of Uranus, I think of words like unpredictable, revolutionary, unconventional, progressive, innovative, radical, eccentric, rebellious, original, and erratic. And Uranus is associated with things like electricity, so it can be shocking. And the 4th house in astrology deals with things like our early childhood and our family dynamics, the way that you feel nurtured and secure in life. It can represent our private life and our inner self, because the 4th house is opposite the 10th house, which is more about our public life. The 4th house deals with things like our ancestry and our familial roots, and it can show us our sense of belonging in this world. Can represent our home and our living arrangements, and even represent our legacy that we will leave on this world. Now, in the whole house system, the 4th house will contain our Imum Coeli, which I will say IC for short in this video. But the Imum Coeli is Latin for the bottom of the sky, which is the lowest part of your birth chart. So those who have their Uranus close to the IC will find that these aspects that I'm going to discuss in today's video play out in their life in a more intense fashion, almost an unavoidable fashion, really. So when I look at a particular placement and know how it's going to play out in someone's chart, I just look at the characteristics that I already know about the planet. And one thing I already know about Uranus is that it has a rocky core. And that's what I feel like children with Uranus in their 4th house have. But why is it rocky? Well, I know there are a lot of things a child needs when growing up, but some of the main things a child needs is some security, instability, consistency, love, emotional support, some structure, some positive role models, and some effective communication. There's a lot more that I could list, but anyways, the point is, children with Uranus in their 4th house often experience some type of instability in meeting one of those needs, or even multiple of those needs. Some Uranus in the 4th house natives can almost feel like they lost their childhood because they often learned how to be independent so early on. But why is that? Well, these individuals' needs were unmet by their primary caretakers, so they had to meet their needs themselves. And these natives may have found that the emotional connection to one of their parents or their primary caretakers was inconsistent in some way. So when working with this placement and the natives that have it, I've actually found a large number of natives with this placement have divorced parents. Now, not everyone I've worked with has divorced parents, but the majority do. But I found something interesting when digging deeper into the natives' parents. They are usually vastly different from one another in some type of way, or they have an unconventional relationship for the time period. So for example, maybe one side of the child's family grew up in poverty, and on the other side, that part of the family grew up middle class or well-to-do. Or maybe their parents practiced two totally different religions. Maybe one parent was Jewish and one parent was Catholic. Or they had parents that were two different nationalities or two different ethnicities. And it even could manifest in the parents being the black sheep of their own family, where they were the odd ones out. They were the different ones. Or maybe mom was the good girl and dad was the bad boy. Mom was a teacher, dad was a criminal kind of thing. And sometimes you find that even though their parents don't seem to have anything in common on the outside, they get together for a common cause. Now, sometimes that common cause is you, but it also can be a social or humanitarian reason. So maybe they're both into civil rights, or they have these progressive views about things politically. But sometimes they're just too different to make it work in the end. And I've also noticed that a lot of natives have parents who have careers related to Uranus as well. So, Uranus is associated with electricity. So maybe a parent who worked in a power plant, or is a lineman, or an electrical engineer, or maybe an electrician, or a musician that plays the electric guitar. And Uranus is a very creative planet that teaches us things. So you can find that parents were teachers or in the arts, like maybe a playwright or a screenwriter or author or songwriter or an artist in some way. Uranus is also a planet that loves to challenge things. So you can find that parents are lawyers or an activist in a social cause. And last but not least, someone with this placement can also have a parent who commits crimes as a way to show the child rebellion. So because the parents often divorce or one parent is absent, you see one parent gone while the other parent raises the child. And often the parent that is raising the child has to focus their energy on other things. So there's really not a lot of good quality time spent with the child. So they become independent and start meeting their own needs. And sometimes you can just find that the household is just unstable. Dad is gone, mom has a mental illness, the child lives in poverty. Sometimes you can see a parent being an alcoholic and who is just really, really erratic. And also a very common thing that I found with a lot of people who have Uranus in their fourth house is that they had to move around a lot. So at least once in their childhood, they moved and had to establish new roots somewhere. Now, sometimes you find that there's actually a lot of moving going on, or even moving to a different country. And when they moved, they could have felt like they were the black sheep or different in some way from the other children at their school. They may have even found themselves like to be, they like to hang out with the misfits or the outliers in school, even though they could have looked like a jock or a cheerleader. They sometimes get bullied when they were younger as well. Cameron Diaz has this placement, and she's beautiful, but she got bullied at school because she's white, and she has blonde hair and blue eyes and a Hispanic last name. So people would tease her, telling her she wasn't a real Latina, even though her dad was Cuban. Like she had any control over how she looked. These children learned how to eventually accept their authenticity. But before they could do that, they have to learn how to rebel and how to fight, which can help them later in life if they ever see a social injustice going on where they feel like one group is bullying another. They can step in and fight. Another thing I've noticed when studying individuals who have their Uranus in their fourth house is that they can kind of have this like general nervousness or anxiety about them. So Uranus rules the nervous system. And sometimes these individuals may feel like some explosion or abrupt thing is going to occur at any moment. They can kind of felt like this same thing when they were a child and not even really know where it's coming from. So maybe they feel like an intruder may enter their house in the middle of the night completely at any time. Or maybe their house will catch fire. Or a war will break out and a bomb will go off near them at any time. Or even a shooting may occur, even though they can live in some relatively safe places. I've always kind of wondered if this is just because they have that abrupt, sudden, erratic energy in their field and they just intuitively know that there's really never truly a safe place anywhere on this earth, that anything can pop off at any time, and they may have to abruptly wake up to handle things. And also, I don't know if I mentioned it, but a house fire is actually one reason someone with Uranus in the 4th house loses connections to their childhood other than moving. They can lose their belongings abruptly. Now, I know that is all the doom and gloom with that this placement can bring, but I do want to say something real quick. I have seen a couple of people, it's not a lot, but I have seen it, who had some very progressive parents at the time and very accepting parents. So these were the parents that embraced their child's sense of authenticity. So it is possible to have parents that do that with this placement. Now, another very interesting thing I've noticed with these natives, and, honestly, it doesn't even really matter how their childhood turned out. They can have an erratic childhood. They can have a stable one. Almost all of the charts I've worked with, the child started working at a young age. These children are quite independent. So typically they start making their own income as a teenager or some even as a child. So what are these natives like when they grow up? Well, actually, they often can transition into adulthood quite effortlessly because they were so independent as a child. And they may even change their name when they get older to separate themselves from their family. And when finding a partner, they can find someone who is radically different than themselves, just like their parents did. Maybe someone with a different ethnicity or nationality, or someone who is quite older or quite younger, or a different religion, or, if you're really tall, someone who's shorter, or if you're short, someone who's really tall. Just someone that seems a bit unconventional from the person that others would expect you to be with. And you can have children in what others deem as unconventional ways with this placement. So maybe you adopt your children, or you have children via surrogacy, or only have stepchildren. This placement can also make it challenging to have a connection to a child. So you could, in fact, be the absent parent, whether you're divorced and gone or you're traveling for work, and you could have even experienced an abortion with this placement. But in its highest vibration, people with this placement create a home that is safe to be unique and different and authentic and free. So they could be parents with the progressive views, and support their trans children, supporting using their new name and their new pronouns. And they can have a unique looking home as well, just full of one-of-a-kind decor, or maybe even artwork from their children hanging up. And if this native is wealthy enough, they may even have multiple homes that they travel to, just because it feels quite natural for them to not have strong roots in one particular place in this world. Now, as far as legacy goes, people with this placement, it would be very interesting to see where they would like to be buried at, or even if they want to be buried at all after passing away. So if you do have this placement, where does home feel like for you? Let me know in the comments below. I love hearing from people that actually have this placement. And as always, I have thoroughly enjoyed unpacking another interesting placement in astrology. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Mwah.